was the fact that, I've been working one way or another in tracking state budgets since 1982. At prior jobs as well as what I'm doing at CBIA. And usually what happens is the governor recommends a budget, the legislature tweaks it a little bit around the edges, and then the majority party votes it as the budget. That's what happens. This year it was very different. There were several budgets that were put forward by the governor. There was one that was put forward by the governor that the Democrats agreed to, but then some Democrats didn't like that because it didn't have certain reforms, and they voted for a Republican amendment. Never happened. The governor then vetoed that, and then there was discussion between the two parties that, boy, we got to talk and come up with a budget, which they did. A historic action, and I think it's also historic, and that they really talked not just on a collegial or friendly level, but in a working level between the two parties. So I'm going to put first to Representative Tweedy and then to Representative Rojas. Okay, you had this historic cooperation. Outside of the budget, first, do you think it can continue? And then second, outside of the budget, what's a topic that you think the two parties can and should work on a cooperative fashion?
Well, basically, all parts of government that need to move on. We've got the education cost sharing that's coming up. Municipal aid that's coming up, a formula for that. I think you can pick any topic.
Yeah, but which one would you pick if you had
well, right now it's all about. Right now, people are most concerned about money, so I would have to say municipal aid and education cost sharing are pretty important right now. And the fairness, again, of the costs are much different in different municipalities, and the amount of schools and towns that have special needs and the cost that drives those special needs. Manchester's one of them. East Hartford's another one. And of course the cities are, but after the cities, it's probably Manchester and East Hartford right up there in that tier that it has to be dealt with, because we are the next size.
The top issues in the next.
Yeah. Well, first, there's been this historic cooperation on the budget. Other than the budget, what do you think is a top topic that both parties should get together and work on together?
The teacher retirement system, which was probably one of the biggest problems we had in the budget, was that the governor presented a budget that was going to shift $400 million to municipalities in teacher retirement costs. I think the point he was trying to make was a fair one. I think the manner in which he tried to do it was really not fair. To assume that we could just push $400 million onto towns and cities, many of whom were in the middle of their budget or getting ready to pass a budget, was just untenable. And it's interesting, almost the entire session between Republicans and Democrats in our budgets, there always seemed to be this $400 million gap. And that $400 million gap just happened to equal the amount that the governor was looking to push down to towns and cities. And what most people don't understand is the state assumes the cost of funding teacher retirement for the local level. And the manner at which it's done, because of salaries that are made and the differences in geography around the state, we actually pay more for a teacher's retirement in Greenwich than we do in a place like New Britain or Hartford, where the difference in per pupil expenditures is $3,000 or $4,000. Right? They simply have more capacity in Greenwich to raise more money locally than Hartford does, and there's an equity there. And the governor was trying to address that inequity, because that costs the state $1.2 billion. Right? So when you talk about municipal aid, it's 20% of the state budget. That it's not an insignificant amount. Without that aid, and I think at least on the East Hartford tax bill, it might say it on the Manchester bill, it says without state aid, your mill rate would be, right? Your mill rate would be really, really high without the state providing municipal aid. And more often than not, a lot of, present company excluded, a lot of local officials get to run around and say, we didn't increase property taxes, we limited it to 1 or 2%. Well, guess who takes the lumps when we have to raise taxes at the state level to keep municipal aid funded, which is something we've done since the recession hit. We do, right? right? I mean,
Deservedly so.
yeah, absolutely. But part of that is trying to raise revenue on a more equitable basis, spread it across a larger area or group of people, rather than just simply on property taxes. And I think that the budget will remain an issue. Municipal aid, I think, will remain an issue. Education will remain an issue too.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, what's a big challenge that you see, that you either have now or you see coming down the road, that the legislature could help with?
Well, first of all, I think they hit on two hot topics. That ECS funding is huge in Manchester. We've been able to create programs and positions that are attacking that achievement gap problem. Okay, I'm working with families that are been funded through those programs, that if they go away, we have to fund them. And of course, the teacher retirement. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't take some responsibility for teacher retirement. But we, as a municipality, did not sit around the table and discuss what that was going to be. So to throw it all at us right now, when we had we weren't involved sitting around the table, is a tough one. But the challenges that face us is the same challenges we have every year, whether we're in a tough financial situation or not. Is where do we balance a budget where we're not asking the taxpayer to pick up more every year, but at the same time, we got to protect the vital services. We have so much to offer in our community that our surrounding more affluent suburban communities don't have. And our biggest concern, obviously, in that area is that we have a local waste plant that supports our free trash pickup. That's going to go away in 2000. We also, the census is telling us in 2025, this is going to be the largest suburban community, population-wise, in Hartford County. Why is that? Because it's affordable. People can come and still buy a home at $150,000 at Capes. The families that moved to South Windsor when they were in 6th grade, or Glastonbury, or Ellington, or Tomlin, these young people who are now in their 20s and early 30s can't afford the $500,000 home amount. So they're coming back and buying $150,000. So that's the challenge. We're going to get bigger. Which get bigger comes with some problems, but we have to continue. But to answer their first question, and I'm going to answer that, is that we must continue to work together. The problem with whether it's the local, state, or federal level is all of a sudden we became blue people and red people and blue states and red states. Well, folks, we're the red, white, and blue states. We gotta work together. And I think Jason Rojas to mention that these two get along, they disagree, that's important to know. But we have to take the gloves off from the political parties. And if we don't take the gloves off, we're like this, we'll never be like this, and we gotta work together. That's the biggest, and they need to continue to work together. It's not gonna work.
Okay. Before I go on the next question, I just want to say to the audience that we're going to leave some time at the end for Q&A. And if there aren't any questions, I'll call on people.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to call on our two legislators. I'm going to start with Representative Tweedy because he's involved in the Education Committee. And if you take a look at the Connecticut economy over the last year, first let's go back to 2016. We ended 2016 with a year-over-year loss of 200 jobs, which is pathetic performance. If you look at where we were at the middle of 2017, we're actually up about 11,000 jobs year over year. If you look at where we were on the report for November 2017, December's not out yet, we were at a year over year loss of 700 jobs. Again, pathetic performance when New England is growing at 1.2% in their workforce, and the U.S. is growing at 1.4%. We are really in bad shape in terms of the ability to fill jobs in Connecticut. And I say fill, not create, for a certain reason. We've done studies. We did studies of manufacturers in the middle of the year. And at that time, manufacturing, which year over year has added jobs, about 2,000, had a need with 13,600 open positions. But I also hear from truckers, from all sorts of building trades, plumbers, HVAC, I hear from companies on sales and sales managers, commercial loan officers, actuaries, nurses, across the board, probably 25,000 good jobs that pay over $15 an hour, most of them with full benefits, that are not getting filled. And we've written about this recently, saying that there's a job crisis. Representative Tweed, what do you see that you would propose, or that could be done by the legislature to help address what's obviously a jobs crisis? Because you'd do a lot better if you had 25,000 more taxpayers.
I think some of it happened in the last budget, some consistency, some predictability, some stability in our budget, in funding of pensions, in our borrowing cap, in our spending cap, so that business owners will feel that the state of Connecticut is doing something to stabilize the costs of doing business in the state. So I think that has to absolutely continue. You know, the cost of living in Connecticut is difficult. So when you talk about, you know, that we've got big employers here, Electric Boat, with Pratt & Whitney, Sikorsky, and then all the companies around that feed off of them, they're all very, very good paying jobs, and the fact that they're in Connecticut is all good for each other. Beyond that, the truck drivers and the construction people who do not make six figures, they're making, you know, as you said, maybe $50,000, and it's difficult to live on $50,000 in Connecticut. So, you know, we need affordable housing. Like Jay said, that people are moving to Manchester because you can buy affordable housing in Manchester. So communities like that will benefit from jobs that are created and people taking these jobs. Hopefully they're here, they'll stay. You know, the education system is a great one in the state of Connecticut, all the way, you know, from our elementary schools to our colleges. But are the people staying here after they leave college? And, you know, what can we do to help people stay here? And I do think it's budget issue. It is being able to predict what the costs of your business are, so that people can budget and run their business accordingly and grow and know that the growth of their business is based on, gee, I don't know what's going to happen next year in the legislature.
Yeah, you know, it really comes down to training programs. We're not producing enough people. Or I think for the better part of 20 years, we went on this kind of college for all type of philosophy. I worked in higher education for 20 years, so I'm all for a 4-year college degree. But we don't need everybody to go to college, and nor should everybody go to college. There are some people who are just not going to enjoy sitting in a classroom for 4 years writing 50-page papers the way I did, right, to get my master's degree. It's not for everybody. And every time I hire a plumber and he gives me a bill at $100 an hour, I'm like, I don't make $100 an hour, and I got a master's degree, right? So it really makes me want to put people into those trades. And we're simply not producing enough workers who are going to fill the almost 40,000 jobs that are out there between Pratt, Electric Boat, and Sikorsky.
And one of the
folks
critical
that Mike needs, right?
One of the critical factors we have right now is the economy needs to generate 40,000 jobs just to cover retirements
That's right.
before it
Well,
gets.
what I was going to say is Connecticut is at the center of a demographic storm. We really are. We're an older state, present company excluded. But, you know, we have a lot of folks who are at retirement age, and we don't have the pipeline of workers who are going there. In particular, we don't have enough African American and Latino from our urban core, where actually population is growing. Population is shrinking in some of our more whiter, wealthier communities, and those communities are sending more kids off to college, sometimes out of state to college, and we're not getting them back. Certainly millennials and young people these days are attracted to cities. We don't have the ritz and glare of a New York or a Boston. If we had really good rail service between New York and Boston, I think we'd get a lot of those people back to an affordable place like Connecticut, which is shocking to say, but relatively speaking, we're far more affordable than living in New York or Boston. If only we had reliable and fast and efficient rail service. But I'd like to pull back on the First Five program, which has been the large kind of corporate incentives that was established by the governor, where we're given hundreds of millions of dollars for to a company to do what they might already be doing, which was investing in workforce. I'd like to pull some of that money back and actually invest it in our community colleges, which we're decimating right now, because that's where we can get some of these kids who are not ready or not interested in going to a four-year institution to go to community colleges. And we have manufacturing programs there that can get them certified in 9 months and 12 months and fill some of the positions that Michael might have. One of the other reality is we've largely been an economy based on financial services and manufacturing. Both of those have been, manufacturing over the last 30 years with opening up to China, and then since 2008, financial services has been killed because we were over-reliant on Wall Street for the better part of 50 years. We loved it when Wall Street brokers went down, got their capital gains, came back and paid taxes, right? Those jobs disappeared after 2008, and we never really recalibrated the size of government and the cost of government to meet a new fiscal reality, which is we're getting $400 million less in income taxes from that group of 100 people who live in Fairfield County and work on Wall Street. And we still need to adjust to that, and that's a lot of difficult decisions because people here in Connecticut, for as much as they hate paying taxes, they love their government. And I mean that by they love their 169 duplication of everything. And I'm not suggesting that county government or regional government is some panacea, but there are certainly opportunities to save money and still deliver services on a quality basis on a more regional level. But that's going to be all up to you, because I can tell you every elected official will tell you my constituents don't want to do something with the next town over, right? At the same time, they'll say my property tax bill is too high. And when we were talking about, and it's a difficult topic in Manchester, but you have 2 fire districts, right? There's 318 fire districts in Connecticut. 318, a lot of them are volunteer, still have a paid chief, still have, procurement services and purchasing services, and do they go out and buy a fire truck on their own? When if we had a county government, could we get 10 fire trucks for less money? Those types of things, they're out there. Same with police dispatch. I would love for Manchester to actually dispatch police and firefighters in East Hartford, because it can be done. Right? Metropolitan Houston has like 1 police dispatch center. It's 3/4 the size of Connecticut. In Connecticut,
It's actually larger than Connecticut.
it's large, yeah.
It's 8 million people in the metro.
Well, in population in terms of geography, right? When people think about police dispatch, they think about geography. Can the cop get to my house, right? But they have 1 police dispatch in Houston, Metropolitan Houston. We have 111 in Connecticut. You guys have to make a decision about how many police dispatches we should have. Because the people who are most opposed are fire chiefs, police chiefs, and local elected officials at helping us achieve some of those savings and those economies of scale that allow us to actually try to at least control property tax increases.
Well, controlling property tax increases and the like, John, what do you think the legislature could do to make the town's job easier in saving money?
I think, every time we do a budget, both on a local level and a state level, it's gotta be completely looked at from top to bottom for opportunities like that. Lately, we've, as Jay had mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of frozen positions at the town level. Certainly that has helped. Most services as we provide, the budgets are primarily wage and benefit related, and we need to stabilize that. I think we've done a good job on a local level doing that. Obviously, the state budget's a completely different situation because they have far more employees than we do, and they have a pension plan that most towns, a lot of towns no longer have. Manchester, for example, doesn't offer new employees pensions anymore. We have a defined benefit, defined contribution plan that is more similar to what private industry is doing. I think a lot of towns have moved to that. So a lot of things that we can do on a local level, we've actually been doing for 10, 15 years. I've worked for the town since 1999. And when I first started, I was in the defined benefit plan, but now I'm in the defined contribution plan, which I moved into in 2003 when I was promoted. So a lot of those are steps that we've already been taking. And every time I know we're doing our budget now, we're starting to go to the board of directors in a month or two. Every year we scrutinize every single thing we can do. We've looked into a lot of different areas as far as trying to, improve things efficiently. I know I've had a couple positions frozen. We've cut down our number of vehicles for the town. A lot of things like that we've done and we've been doing. And I know the state's been doing that too. So I think a lot of that's already been there. It just takes a long time. A lot of these issues maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago could have been looked at and they weren't, and we're still paying for some of those decisions that were made then.
Mr. Mayor, we've heard about regionalism, but we also know that there are a lot of mandates that the state imposes
Unfunded mandates.
unfunded mandates. What's the top one of those mandates that you'd like to see these guys work on to eliminate or modify?
I mean, I can't give you an answer right now. I mean, I just think that they need to realize that anytime they make a decision, that sooner or later, the taxpayer gets affected. It's gonna trickle down to us, and we saw that this year with the mill rate. You know, we have a lot of unfunded, unfunded mandates in education, which is, you know, one thing we have to look at is, and I know this is a Democrat thing, but, you know, by law, we have to give the Board of Education exactly what they had last year. Is that correct, Representative Rowan?
Yeah.
So we're forced in the corner to make, right from the start, we're behind the eight ball on that with our budget. So that's probably the biggest one.
That's even if your school population goes down, right?
Correct. And I'm not saying we're gonna cut the Board of Education budget, so I know you get your camera on. But the reality is that, and it's the same, and I say that, Representative Tweed said this earlier, you know, 80% of your budget is already done before you even start doing your budget, correct? Or whatever the number is. So, you know, so we're caught in a situation that comes back to whether we wanna, you know, quality services. Here's how my analogy. I was on a school board here, a Catholic school board, years ago in town. I remember the parents saying to me, we wanna raise teachers' salaries. Okay, great, but we're not gonna increase tuition. Well, how are you gonna do that when you're tuition driven? You talk about the products, we're tax driven for most of our revenue. So, we have to look at it from that angle, is that we have to balance it somehow. And it's gonna be a continued fight. One area we haven't touched out, and here, this room, is we have a bunch of small business owners in here. That's an area that we need to look to start helping the small business. We have done a great job, and it's not the game we created. We got Bob's in town here, we created 300 jobs, right? 300 more jobs. You know, tax exemptions there. We've created jobs in the hospital by saving a hospital tax exemption. But the small business owner is not getting that same thing, and that's something we really have to look at a municipal level and the state level. How we're gonna help the small business owner survive their group of 5 in their office, or 20, or 25, or 50 up the street at the supermarket. That's what we have to look at too, because the people in this room need help too with their businesses.
I'm gonna ask one more question and then open it up to you folks. So be thinking about your questions. You don't want to get called on. Right now, as part of the budget, the legislature created a commission on fiscal sustainability and economic growth. That commission has been meeting, and they have to present the legislature by March 1st a group of recommendations that will be crafted into a bill which has to be voted on. It either gets approved in its entirety or it gets rejected in its entirety, but it gets presented to them. So, you know, one of the key things that was discussed at the last meeting with this was there was a presentation on the condition of the state, both economically and fiscally. And not surprisingly, unfunded liabilities of the state were there in a glaring fashion, to the tune of $85 billion of unfunded liability. And there was a lot of talk about how this paying for this unfunded liability with one of the highest debt service costs, over 13% in the budget, is eating away at other programs and opportunities. I look at other states and I see that they've got an $80 million, $100 million, $200 million jobs fund. And some of them are using it to raid other states like us. Come on, y'all come on down and we'll train your people for free. Which is, and I'm sure you've gotten those calls, right? I mean, there's a real problem with this because as the programs get cut out. So, unfunded liabilities, a massive problem, not easy. Starting with Representative Rojas.